You are going to be so thrilled to hear what's on Shoe and Show today.
There is a consumer fatigue also with just trust in pricing. They're tired of the game of trying to chase product on sale, constantly looking for discounting. The younger the consumer, in fact, the more they would prefer to just have a fair price from the get-go and not play the high-low game.
Hey, welcome back to Shoe and Show. We are so excited you're joining us today for another exciting episode. This is Thomas. I've got Christie with me. We're from FDRA. We're really excited about our guest today. We have had this year a really engaging and exciting event, the Shoe Executive Strategy Summit. We're bringing a special guest from that event who unveiled a report that really shared a lot of insight with the attendees for that. So wanted to do a special Shoe and Show episode about that. And Christie, tell us who we've got on the show today.
Yes, thank you, Thomas. I am so excited to welcome Bryan Eshelman to Shoe In today. Bryan is America's retail leader of AlixPartners. He is a key partner of FDRA. So, Bryan, we are super excited to welcome you to the show. Last week in Washington, D.C., you unveiled the U.S. Consumer and Executive Footwear Survey. Walk us through what we learned in that survey, and then one key takeaway that was either surprising or super interesting to you.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me again on the show. It's great to be back and honored to have the partnership that we have with FDRA and hopefully giving something back to the industry of value. Yeah, the survey this year was interesting. In some ways, a lot of repeat themes from prior years. You know, the consumer is getting fatigued by inflation, by price increases. Price is still the number one determinant of whether a consumer will buy a shoe or not buy a shoe. But there were a couple of things that at the highest level jumped out as different this year. One was that athletic and athleisure shoes, which have been the driver of growth for many and the casualization of the U.S., kind of society, were signaled by consumers as no longer being something they're willing to spend more on this year. The survey pivoted to the only category being flat and not down, really, was casual shoes, as different from athletic and athleisure shoes, which were both down. So that was an interesting finding, but I think, it depends on how you define casual. And so we asked some follow-up questions there. The other thing that jumped out was price, still number one in terms of why people will buy or not buy. But there is a consumer fatigue also with just trust in pricing. They're tired of the game of trying to chase product on sale and constantly looking for discounting. The younger the consumer, in fact, the more they would prefer to just have a fair price from the get-go and not play the high-low game. And so they're getting a bit fatigued by that. So reasons people are not buying a shoe and abandoning a purchase, actually, the fact that the item is not on sale went down almost in half in terms of why people would abandon a shoe, which is interesting, right? Like they're abandoning it because it's not on a sale. It's less important to them. And that just speaks to they want to have a fair price from the beginning. They don't want to play that price discount game. The other thing that was interesting was that in stock on a size or an item doubled in terms of its reason why people abandon a purchase year over year with last year. So, many footwear brands and retailers are, of course, trying to do more with less in terms of inventory, but consumers are frustrated by not being able to have the size that they want in stock, particularly when they're in a store, because they've gone there to purposefully buy something. And if they can't have that instant gratification, then they're frustrated.
Talking about that consumer frustration and the demand's still there, right? Like we still have a huge demand for footwear, but you mentioned the price is the number one purchase driver. And I think one thing you look at the report, I talked about how consumers are looking for less expensive brands, and just wondering, well, that's a concern for us too, for a lot, for one other reason we can get into it, another time, but counterfeiting is an issue. We talked about that before the USTR, as we said, this environment where, you're creating a market where consumers are, they're looking for similar products that are not, that look similar, but are not the same. And so that was one of our concerns with the tariffs is you're driving this very difficult environment. And so that was what we pointed out, but just wondering what are some of the things you're seeing there as far as that issue goes, not necessarily counterfeiting, but just looking for cheaper products. What are the statistics or the survey reports showing there?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, you have to first zoom out and really think about the trajectory of inflation in general over the last few years, honestly. The core inflation numbers came out, or the headline inflation and core inflation numbers came out last week or earlier this week. It's been a blur. Inflation up 3.3%, largely driven by fuel prices and gasoline prices up high double digits. I think it was 18 or 19% on gas. But core inflation, which excludes food and energy, still 2.6% year-over-year increase for the month, which is on top of an increase last year and then on top of an increase the year before. So, you start to compound those increases and also understand that share of wallet is going more and more towards needs versus wants in general with fuel prices going up. The consumer is strapped. And so, how much they can spend on footwear is certainly depending on that. What are they doing in response? One of them is kind of, as you said, looking for cheaper alternatives. Although there is a kind of countervailing attitude, which really did pop in this year's survey pretty brightly, which is people are looking for durability and quality and looking for multi-use, multi-occasion footwear, right? So they're stretching their dollars in two ways there. One, buying a pair of shoes that they can use for more than one occasion, stretches their wallet. And then paying more attention to buying a quality pair of shoes that they know will last for a few years, particularly if it's a multi-occasion product. It's probably not as fashion oriented. And so, it has a bit more longevity. So I think that's one thing that certainly jumps out. Bottom line, though, they realize that they're spending more on shoes. And the number one reason in the survey that people said that they will be spending more on shoes this year is because they know they have to spend more per pair. Doesn't mean they're going to buy more pairs. It means they're going to spend more per pair.
And the frustration part you mentioned, one thing that jumped out at me was the customer walks in and the shoe size, they don't have the right shoe size and they're done, they're out, right? I mean, you talk about that and what type of inventory strategies do you need if that is the frustration or the mindset right now of consumers as a brand? What do you need to be thinking about?
Yeah. I mean, look, the surveys that we've done in footwear and other categories over the last few years really do highlight that customers who come to a store and don't find what they want, not only will walk out, but they won't proactively on their own go to that retailer's website looking for that product. They will go next door. And I think that implies a couple of things operationally. One, your sophistication level around how you deploy your inventory needs to increase, right? There's many retailers that forever have looked at fairly unsophisticated and rule of thumb based approaches to skewing their inventory at the size level, let's say by store location or by region. That needs to be something that is down to the brand, store, style, color level now. I mean, it needs to be done that way. The good news is using AI and other new technologies, that's a doable thing. The second thing is in store in particular, where this is still for footwear consumers, their number one favorite mode of shopping is in-store shopping. You have to have a save the sale mentality. You have to have a proactive sales force that understands that the size isn't there, but is offering to ship it for free to their home or, whatever it is that can capture that demand, because conversion, while traffic in stores in general has gone down, conversion is going up. People are there with intent, and you have to capture that while it's there. So I think, sale training programs, even on floor tools, like, look, if you go into the back room in a shoe store to find a size, the customer is likely to walk out, right? Because they've lost the bond with that salesperson. So having the ability for a salesperson on the floor to check inventory in the back room and online, on a mobile device or something, is an important tactic. So things like that come to mind in terms of capturing that demand when it's there.
That's so interesting. I mean, there are so many things to unpack there. One of them is, do you find you're saying that people purposely go into stores to purchase footwear? Do you find that people are researching that online? They're not making the purchase online. They're going indoors. Do you find that they're researching online before they go to the store? And even if they don't have it there, they'll still go somewhere else based on size.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's very few customer journeys today that don't start with some sort of online or mobile research, right? Particularly in discretionary categories. So yes, by and large, people are checking stock before they show up at the store. They want to make sure their trip isn't wasted. And so having, that real-time visibility and making sure that your systems are accurate in terms of what's in the store and what's not is important. And that, is everything from making sure you have good record keeping, of course, when you ship stuff to the stores, but so much of online returns come to stores, and making sure that you're quickly exposing that inventory as available in the store is another kind of tactic that, you need to really dial in on as a footwear retailer in particular.
I think one thing that was interesting too, it kind of jumped out at me at the beginning, is the executives, footwear companies versus consumer expectations. That they didn't necessarily line up. The executives may be pessimistic, but then consumers were even more so, right? I mean, and what's your read there, and what do you make of that?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. I mean, just think about the last few years in retail, and go back to the post-COVID highs that happened. Where retailers, I mean, you had to be asleep to not log sales increases in the high single, low double digits because of the amount of money that was flooding into the economy. And yet, despite that kind of off the trajectory, the normal trajectory increases that many retailers had in 2021, they planned up on top of that in 2022. And that was irrational, right? In retrospect, there was no way that you were going to sustain an increase on top of a double-digit increase year on year. But no retail CEO or retail merchant can walk into the boardroom and say, we're planning down this year. That's just not a muscle that anybody has. And even if it's rational. And so I think there's a bit of that in the executive survey, right? Everybody knows that the consumer is under stress, but everybody believes or wants to believe that they will take more than their share and actually increase their business this year. And look, that's probably healthy, right? If you're a brand and a CEO and running a business like that, you need to have that optimism, and you need to have that confidence, and you need to make sure that you're doing things to actually capture that. But I'm not surprised that the execs were more optimistic than the consumers in that way. I think it's kind of part of the annual cycle of retail to be optimistic.
So let's go back to the consumer a little bit. We were talking about how casual seems to be the shoe right now that people are continuing to buy. They're expecting it to be more durable and better quality for the price. And you said that athletic is kind of declining. So what does casual mean? I know that stretches out through a couple of different, so we have flats, we have athletic shoes, we have shoes that you said that you can attend different events and wear. What does that, so the consumers are flocking to that. What does that mean that brands should do? How should brands respond to that?
Well, I think no matter kind of what your construction or style is as a brand, I think you need to be merchandising product, positioning it, promoting it, showing, the brand models wearing footwear in whatever it is in multiple occasion kind of settings, right? So if it's athletic footwear, I think showing, yes, that brand customer running in that shoe, or that brand model running in that shoe, yes, but also wearing it with a suit and going to a dinner or whatever. I think kind of sparking the idea in the consumer's mind that that's something that they can and should do. It's really interesting. We asked, and I think we're going to end up having to revise our survey next year. We try to ask some of these questions the same way year over year so that we can see how things change. And like I said, casual was the only category that was flat. It was down 1% in kind of net intent to purchase more or less. Athletic was next. It was down 5%. Athleisure was next, down 8%. But then we asked as a follow-up, what does casual mean to not the same exact set of consumers, but a similar panel? The number one answer was athletic sneakers. The number two answer was non-athletic sneakers, followed by sandals and clogs, of all things. So the consumer, I don't know. I think the takeaway here is that the lines are so blurred in the consumer's mind on what makes an athletic sneaker or what makes a casual shoe. And, I think we're going to have to revise the survey next year to ask these questions differently and much more specifically, because casual is just such a broad and undefined category. I think it's more a state of mind than a shoe.
That makes sense. And where you are, and I know I see out on the street and I wear them myself, like an athletic shoe during the day when I work out and then walking to work. So I can definitely relate to the consumer there.
Yep.
Well, speaking of broad and undefined, let's talk AI, right? Like there's so many things. It's so many different tools out there. There's these fit tools now where you can use AI to get the right fit. And then there's a million things in every seminar you go to, every event, there's something on AI and how it's going to, revolutionize the industry and you should use it here. But then consumers, they're not necessarily trusting completely of AI in general, but also of the fit tools, right? Like, is it just wondering if you're a brand, where does it make sense with AI? Where should you be thinking of that? And how are consumers feeling about these type of tools, getting the right fit for your shoe?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, AI is such a broad topic. It's really, embedded in almost everything that we discuss with clients today. I would say most of the brands and retailers we're working with are finding the most success in AI in applications that are less consumer facing and more internal, kind of operational or efficiency oriented, at least for now. I think consumers are wary of things that are too gimmicky, honestly, that cause them to have to, I don't know, take some sort of picture of their foot or their shoes and, upload that to supposedly find the best fit for them. I think there's a lot to be said for, on the fit issue, just fundamental, operational and product and manufacturing concepts like consistency. If you as a brand can't manage to have your size and fit be consistent across styles and seasons, that's a real issue. And one that I think many footwear retailers and brands have gotten away from as they've kind of outsourced a lot of the product development and fitting process and last making process to their vendors. And if you have multiple vendors making multiple types of shoes for you, using different last companies and specs, like it's a recipe for inconsistency, right? And so I think taking control of that part of your supply chain in a way that allows you to ensure to your customer that if she's a size 8.5 in a casual shoe, she's also a size 8.5 in a dress shoe, and next year when she buys the new update on that, she's also still a size 8.5. And that, unfortunately, is not all that common. And so that, I think, is the starting point, because consumers, they trust reviews online. They trust AI summarized reviews, but they don't trust, because they know either explicitly or implicitly that shoe consistent fit isn't there, even within a brand. They don't really trust that an AI tool that tells them it's going to be a good fit is accurate, because how can the AI tool know what the new shoe fits like versus last year's version? It just can't.
Yeah, there's a human element too. I mean, that's a great point on consumer facing. I mean, I think about that if you're, there's, listening to the radio, they advertise, it's always human or 100% human. And then, sometimes you get frustrated talking to something. Am I talking to a robot, or am I talking, if it's customer service? So I certainly see the importance of that with the consumer facing side, and then looking internally and seeing where it makes sense to invest within the company in AI. I'm going to throw a really difficult question out there, because we don't know what's going to happen today or tomorrow, but over the next 6 months, right? Like, what, from your perspective, should companies be doing differently over the next 6 months?
I think that companies in the footwear sector need to be sure that they are finding places where kind of averages were good enough in history, and breaking those down and understanding where they are no longer good enough. And that is everything from IMU based pricing. So, really targeting a margin on a price point and accepting a cost if that meets that margin target, when the reality is the product that you're buying could be actually worth a lot less. Look, vendors know this. They price products when they sell them to you, because they know what margin you're targeting and they know your price point that you're trying to hit at retail. So that's been good enough for a long time. I don't think that's good enough anymore. I think, your retailers and brands need to really get under the covers and the details of should cost analysis and really understanding that. Pricing, it's been good enough to have blanket kind of price increases, blanket discounts and promotions. That's not good enough anymore. You have to be much more precise on where you're going to raise prices because you have to, where you can't raise prices because the consumer will push back, and when and where and by how much you're discounting can't be so broad brush anymore. Putting the whole store on sale 20%, it is easy, but it's not really the way to drive the right outcomes anymore. And so getting, below the covers where averages used to be good enough. Average, we talked about this before, average size runs by different types of store, not good enough anymore. You need to have that down to the store brand color level to really drive the best productivity of your retail space, of your inventory investment and the like. So I think that's really, how do you take, new technologies that, like AI, that allow retailers to address problems that were way too complicated before because there were too many variables, too many data points, and not something that you could put in a spreadsheet or a software tool, and turn them into a much more specific solution going forward. I think that's where I would focus.
You just answered a really detailed, in-depth, challenging question. So we're going to play a little bit of a game and kind of add some levity to the episode. You are a veteran of Shoe and Show. The last time you were on the show, we played What You Got, What You Getting with Matt and Andy, which was super fun. Today, we are doing rapid fire. So this is a little different. It's overrated, underrated. So I'm going to give you, might be a little polarizing.
That's scary, yeah.
So I'm going to give you a topic, and you can either rapid fire or explain a little bit more.
Okay.
All right, Bryan, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. AI in retail.
Underrated.
Awesome. Limited.
Despite the craziness around it right now, underrated. I don't think we have any idea what's coming, but anyway.
I think that's a great answer. Limited drops. Overrated?
Overrated.
Overrated.
Overrated. Yeah. Our consumer survey said that things like celebrity collabs were pretty low on the list of reasons to buy a shoe. Interesting.
Very interesting, because I feel like back before 2020, those were really popular. So
Yeah. They're look, they drive buzz, but they don't drive sales. Like the volumes aren't there, right? So I'm all about the numbers. So underrated or overrated, sorry.
Okay, I think I know the answer to this. In-store experience.
Underrated.
DTC, direct to consumer, or wholesale versus wholesale.
Oh, so I'm picking one?
Yeah.
Or are they both overrated or both underrated?
I think wholesale is underrated and DTC for brands is overrated. I think that many brands have an aspiration to shift their business to DTC away from wholesale because they see the retail margins and would love to have that. They underestimate the complexity of being a retailer versus being a wholesaler massively. And so that's why I'm explaining my answer a little bit.
I like it. Okay, the last one, the next big shoe, the next thing coming. Overrated, underrated.
Underrated, because I think we need a shakeup. I think we need a new reason for people to go out and buy something new. So I'm going to say underrated.
Love it. Thank you so much, Bryan. And if you are listening to this and you are interested in finding the survey, Matt just sent it out in the What I'm Hearing. You can also find it at AlixPartners. And we really appreciate having you.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for having me again.
I like the lightning round topic there. I think we should add that to the show for sure. All right, another exciting episode of Shoe In. As Christie mentioned, excited to have Bryan on. You can email us about the report. Hope you got it in What I'm Hearing. Hope you're getting those for an FDRA member. Let us know if you're not. Every Monday, Matt sends out the What I'm Hearing email. Be sure to rate us wherever you listen to this and watch the videos, right, Chris? We've got videos now. You can access that on youtube.org. So you can, if you listen to this, you're missing a lot. You can watch us and watch our reactions too. Bryan, we can talk to you forever, but enjoy this episode. This was great. Hope you'll join us for the next one. And with that, Shoe In Show is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.